Hey everybody, welcome to the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure Writing, how to create your SOP webinar. Thank you all for attending. There is an attendee chat. If you are calling in, the slides will be up on YouTube later today or tomorrow. So this is going to be all about writing SOPs. So Chris, I'm joined by my business partner, Chris Sauber.
Hello,
from DSCSCRO. And Chris, why do sites need SOP?
Well, before we get into that, I actually have a question for you that I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
You might not know the answer as well.
Okay.
So, seeing as how we've been fortunate enough never to have been audited at any site, right?
Right.
Whether it's a client site or a site we actually own, no FDA audits, knock on wood. Or does the FDA mandate or require the sites to have SOPs? Because as far as I know, they only require SOPs of the sponsor.
So we actually Googled that, remember?
Yes.
We Googled it and we could not find a definitive answer. And the answer is actually, technically, the sites don't need SOPs, but practically speaking, every single sponsor requires it.
Okay.
And that's because they don't want to take all the liability.
So with that being said, if the FDA doesn't mandate it, so if the FDA should audit a site, they'll ask to see your SOPs. So the less you have, the better, right? Because the FDA can't hold you to something that you don't have. If it's not in writing, they can't hold you to it. So really, all you need in regards to SOPs are what the sponsor requires you to have. And most sponsors really only request, I would say 75% of the time, the only SOP they require to see from your site is your informed consent process. So really, that's the only SOP that you absolutely need at all times. The other SOPs you create as necessary. That would be the way I would probably approach SOPs if I were a new site. Being that we've been doing this for quite some time, we have a comprehensive SOP, a total of 41 sections. But really, it's the informed consent is all you really need to worry about, other than instances in which sponsors want to see how you handle IP storage or IP transportation, things. But those are not typical. It's typically just the informed consent process.
Yes. So the way that, and I know we're breaking up once in a while. We're trying to do our best with the Wi-Fi here. Not the greatest. The way I started the SOP for my site back in 2005, first of all, I didn't even know I needed it. And then the sponsor asked me, where's your SOPs? So then I had to look up what SOP was, and I realized it's basically like a recipe guide for your business. Like other businesses use SOPs as well. McDonald's has really extensive detailed SOPs for their franchisees, and then employee handbooks. So when I started my SOP, I created it with the mindset of giving it to an employee, giving it to a study coordinator, and saying, here's what you need to follow. When I'm not here, you have questions, you ask this manual. So I tried to make it as detailed as possible. And only later did I realize, as I've worked with more CROs, you're asking for trouble, because if it's in your SOPs and you're not following it, the FDA can hold you to that. And then they could look into it and say, well, what else are they not following at this point? So then they start looking into other things.
And if you're not following your SOPs, that is a finding by the FDA. So yeah, you definitely have to follow your SOPs. So the less detailed they are, the better, actually.
Right. So I made the mistake of making mine very detailed, and there's a strategy there too. So what you can do is have employee handbooks, which are very detailed, and then have an SOP. And when the FDA comes in, they're not going to ask for your employee handbook. They're going to ask for your SOP. And you give them that. So what are SOPs? Okay. SOPs, standard operating procedures, structured guidance document that details the steps in achieving an outcome. So in this case, it's managing your site. Okay. Written instructions. Yes, the slides will be available on YouTube afterwards. This recording will be on YouTube sometime today or tomorrow. So when I started my SOPs, I just started with the basics, and I literally, the most important part of the SOP is the informed consent SOP. They'll ask you for this at every site selection visit you will ever have, right? Just about.
At some point, you will definitely be asked for it. Maybe not the site selection visit, but your site initiation visit, or somewhere in there. Definitely, you're going to be asked for that.
So what I did, literally went to the GCP guidelines for informed consent, and I just copy and pasted it and put it in our SOP. Like, that's it. Some of the CROs I've worked for, because I'm a contract CRA as well, so I've worked for various CROs in the past, and their SOPs are so vague. I mean, remember when we were writing our SOP for our CRO? They're so vague, and that's intentional. It's not because the people writing the SOP are clueless and don't know what they're doing. They're keeping it vague because they know, should the FDA ever audit that CRO or that site, they're going to hold you accountable for following your own SOPs. So the more vague they are, the better, but you do need to include a bare minimum amount so that the sponsor accepts you for the study.
Yep.
Right?
I would say the informed consent is the only SOP that needs to be very specific. The other SOPs much less detailed, unless the sponsor says. Of course, if the sponsor says to you, "This is not acceptable. We need this change to your SOP," then of course you have to do that if you want to take on that study. But for the most part, the ICF part of your SOPs is the only item that I would have with some specifics. Again, like Dan had mentioned, following GCP would be one aspect of your SOPs, and there can be additional, like with our SOPs, there's an item in there that the person being consented will initial and date each page. That's not a requirement by the FDA, or I would say 50% of IRBs, but it is a requirement of our SOPs. So that's an additional detail that's not necessary. So definitely needs to incorporate GCP, but outside of that, really nothing else is needed further in order to get approved by the sponsor for the study.
The vaguer, the better. Now, if you're writing an employee manual or a study coordinator manual, that's not an SOP. That could be as detailed as you want, because in an audit, unless they ask for that, which they won't know you have one unless you tell them.
Or you just deny if they even ask.
Unless they see it. If they see it, then they can audit it.
Right.
The FDA is just gonna ask for your SOP. So you can be as detailed as you want in your employee manual, your employee workbook. And this is what this is what I did early in 2005, 2006 with my first research clinic. So I literally just mapped out every process we had. And Chris actually has the table of contents for the SOPs, which we'll get into at the end a little bit. But when I started, how many sections do we have in our SOP now? 41? When I started, there were 10. And then I kept adding to it when monitors would ask, "Hey, do you have an SOP for destroying your IP?" And I didn't, but I said, "Yeah, I do. Let me get that for you." So I go in the office, write up 2 paragraphs,
Sure.
incorporate it in the SOP. And so we keep doing that because as the years go on, sponsors start requiring new things. And every sponsor is different. So some sponsors ask for, like, what's the last one we did? Lab kit destruction. I literally just wrote that one like 3 weeks ago at one of my sites. So that's section 41 or 43? 41. Lab kit destructions. We didn't have that before because usually the sponsors take their lab kits back, or they have you ship them back at the end of the study.
That's not true. I would actually disagree with that. At least in the last 5 years, they've had the sites destroy them. I had just never been asked for the SOPs for that, but they just assumed over the last 5 years, the sponsors that we worked with, that we have some process. They just never asked for the SOPs. For this particular trial, they did ask for the SOP.
All right, thank you, Chris. We have a question. Once you have your SOPs, how do you update it? Creating an amendment or a whole new SOP, or including note to files, what should be done? So there's different ways to do it. The simplest and the way I do it, I just add a new section, and then all staff members, make sure you do this. One of our sites got audited for not doing this.
There's one detail I'd like to add to that, and I think it's that site that you're referring to. That site that was audited, they wanted to see a version number on SOPs. So the best way to go is, like Dan said, just add a new section. You don't need to update the whole SOP, but have a version, right? So each time you update it, say this is version whatever, 10, 12, 15, 1,000, whatever it might be, however many times you've updated, and then the date that it was updated.
And one step further, make sure that your staff signs a signature page stating that they've been trained on the new version of the SOP. This was a finding at one of our sites that got audited by an IRB.
Right.
And it was actually one of the biggest findings that they had. So make sure you do this. Our sites have started doing this. It's actually in my list of to do right now. We got another comment. Our site has always done a note to file for IP destruction or lab kit destruction. Yes, ours too, but every now and then you'll get a sponsor that asks for your SOP for those things. And at the closeout visit, they will actually take a copy of it with them. So in those cases, a note to file for IP destruction or lab kit destruction is not enough. You actually need to make an amendment to your note to file. So add a new section and have all your staff sign the SOP revision page or SOP training page, and then you're good to go. But yes, I agree with the commenter. Most of the times, note to file do suffice, and that's I guess the main concept here is every sponsor is different, and you never know what they're going to ask. But when you do need to update your SOP, you will update it, right? And it's a living document that should be updated when needed. Next slide. So we have 41 sections in our SOP. So key components of the SOP. So Chris, I guess now would be a good time to read through some of the sections of the SOP. You want to give them a rundown?
Okay, everybody. Hopefully I don't bore you to death here. I'll read all 41 sections. So there's an introduction. That's basically, what is the SOPs discussing. Definition of study coordinator and general duties. Initial sponsor contact, research budget. So this is how things are handled, right? All of these are how these processes are handled. Site selection visit, institutional review board, good clinical practice, occupational safety and health administration, OSHA, clinical operations, informed consent procedures, source documents, case report forms, scheduling patients, utilizing the research assistant, regulatory, laboratory, good laboratory practices, investigational product, obtaining patient medical records, subject recruit, serious adverse events, investigator meetings, ratings and raters, patient reimbursement, driver reimbursement, regular monitoring visits, working with the finance department, working with human resources department, site closeout visit, archiving, audits, site confidentiality, patient safety, employee safety, ongoing training and documentation, IP destruction, medical emergency, controlled substance standards, blinding procedures, and laboratory kit destruction. Now, I would say only really half of those are pertinent. unless
Yes.
requested by the sponsor, of course. But only half of those are absolutely pertinent. Again, getting back to what I said initially, the only one that's initially absolutely necessary is the informed consent one. You'll always be requested for that. But I would say half of these have been requested at one time or another by a sponsor. I don't know where the other half came from. I think that was more from the initially, like you had said, the study coordinator handbook, basically.
Yeah, I took elements from the study coordinator handbook and added it there, just so we have more sections. But over the years, they've actually gotten more vague rather than more detailed, and that's again in case of an audit. So here are the 6 minimum things you need. Actually, Amy developed these slides. So the 6 minimum topics your SOP should cover, and let me know if you agree with this. Recruitment and retention of participants, informed consent, like you said, filing and record keeping, so that's like source documents, right? IRB review, initial modification, continuing review, documenting, resolving, and reporting protocol deviations and violations, adverse events, unanticipated problems, and study closure. I think what's missing there, a 7th one, that I would add for just, again, a bare minimum is something about investigational product storage.
Yeah, I would say this is the next most requested item after ICF is how you deal with investigational product in many different aspects. Because oftentimes you'll have to transport drug if for some reason you're doing an inpatient portion of the study's inpatient. You'll need investigational product transportation. You'll need how is it stored, how is it destroyed. All of these different items are requested at one time or another. So yeah, investigational product would be the next most requested after ICF, I think.
Okay, and then process mapping. So again, know the regulations, okay, because it's unlikely that you're going to get audited by the FDA, but it is possible, and you need to be ready, right? Like you want to make sure that what's in your SOPs is actually in alignment with GCP, and make sure it's the new revision, the 2016 revision of GCP, okay? OHRP 45 CFR 46 and FDA 21 CFR 50, 56, and 312. ICH GCP, OHRP, and FDA guidance, and then institutional policy. So in some of these next slides, I like what Amy did. But basically, make sure that what you're putting in your SOPs is in alignment with the regulations. Like there's no shortcut. You've got to go look at those and make sure you're in compliance. If you need help, Chris and myself do this through our consulting company. We actually will create or help you create SOPs if you're a client of ours, which we'll get into a little bit at the end. So again, who's the best person to write it? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be the PI. In fact, rarely is it going to be the PI. It's going to be the site director, the owner, somebody managing the site. It could be the study coordinator. So set up a meeting with those that are involved in the process. You can bring on outside consultants and experts and pay them a little extra to be there just to make sure that you're, again, in alignment with the regulations. Okay. And this should be well written. And again, I can't emphasize it enough. Keep it generic because the FDA will hold you to it, even if you're exceeding industry standards in your SOP. If you're only meeting minimum industry standards, but your SOPs are exceeding industry standards and you're not following that, the FDA is going to then look into everything else you do.
It'll also be a finding.
And it will also be a finding. Okay, so next slide. There's some good resources here at the end. Everyone who's registered for this meeting will actually get the replay link emailed to them. And then this will be on YouTube for everyone else later on. So the template, all right? Our template's very simple, right? It's Word with sections and that's it.
Sure.
Right?
Easily converted to PDF, but it doesn't need to be complicated.
Right. So
don't make it complicated.
So here they mentioned that you should have version numbers and effective dates, like you said. Author signature and date. Authorizer signature and date. I would also add a employee or staff training page. Very important lately. seems like. Okay. And that's actually something we have to do at some of our other sites. Just everyone signed that they've been trained on the SOP. So when writing SOPs, make sure the language is clear and concise, obviously. Just the simpler, the better. Okay, this is not your employee handbook. Don't make the mistake I made when I started and thinking that an SOP is an employee handbook, because in any other industry it is, but in our industry where it's highly regulated, the SOP is what you're being held accountable for. Now, if you can have an employee workbook, and if an employee doesn't follow that workbook, that's between you and the employee, not the FDA, right?
Sure.
The last thing you want is the FDA to say, no, you're not following your own procedures. So if you keep it vague, it's harder to prove. And sadly, that's the kind of industry we're in, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's some good resources. Oh, since the PI is ultimately responsible, he or she should be the one who authorizes all SOPs. So if your site only has one PI, that's easy. If your site has numerous PIs, I would say it's the one that is most senior, right? But
Okay, well, actually, I have a question about that. Wouldn't it be dependent upon the study, right? So whatever PI is responsible for whatever study, essentially they're authorizing those SOPs for that study.
right, so then you run the risk of having numerous versions of SOPs for different studies.
Well, it could be the same version. It's just different PIs for each study, right? So you have PI X for this study, PI Y for that study,
Yeah.
right? It's the same SOPs for both studies.
They're just authorizing it.
Correct.
Sure. But if they want something changed and the other one doesn't.
Sure. So if the study X requires an additional SOP, right, that needs to be added for some procedure, then for that study it'll have, taking our SOPs for example, it will have 42 items compared to this study that only has 41. It can get kind of confusing at some point, I would imagine.
Someone asked, wouldn't it matter of the specialty of the physician for the study? So yes, it does, but for an SOP, it's a very generic document, so it doesn't require specialization of any clinical knowledge on the SOPs, right? That's the protocol. In the SOPs, you're not really writing, unless your site only does a certain kind of study, and then you have a section for a particular procedure that is done like is standard in every study, then yes, you would need a specialist to sign off on that part. But for the most part, most sites are multi-therapeutic, and so the vaguer, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, last slide, and this is good, and then we'll get into some more questions. I like this one from Amy, and I'm gonna, like I said, email this replay to all of you. Some resources, right? These are really good links. One of this last one, the ITHS, it's like some university somewhere that has templates for everything. Anything you want, like SOP template, informed consent template, it's all there. It's iths.org/forms. You want to go to it and see just real quick? iths.org/forms. I was really impressed with that site. Never heard about it until Amy created these slides for me. And I'm glad she brought this to my attention. And the other ones I have heard, like ICH GCP, if you need to brush up on your industry knowledge, go there. Obviously, the FDA has different material you can look into. The OHRP, ITHS, the same place I'm referring to now, has a research coordinator core training. So lots of good stuff here. What do you see there on those forms? iths.org/forms. So yeah, University of Washington, Chris's alma mater. So check it out. Go down. There's forms. I think you have to click on one of those. Yeah, I went on this yesterday. Probably. Don't download anything. This is going to kill the bandwidth. But just read the forms that were on there.
Links to institutional forms, library forms for credit.
There's even SOP templates on there. So there's all kinds of forums on there. Go check it out. ITHS is a really good website. Just go to iths.org and play around with it. The other ones I knew about, I'm assuming many of you who have been in this industry know about. But ITHS, I guess from the University of Washington, is really good. So keep a bookmark on that, Chris, because that's useful. And now I wanted to talk to you guys about if you need help running your site or creating SOPs, which, by the way, you can do for free. But if you need studies, if you need help doing your feasibility surveys, operating your site, negotiating contracts and budgets, creating source docs, whatever it is, our consulting firm does it. We charge $1,000 a month to month, no contract needed, much cheaper than any broker, probably by 10 times, much more value than you'll get from anyone else. Most traditional study brokers will just get you a study. We do the feasibility. We help
Charge $2,000 a month for that.
and charge double. Yeah, and only do the studies. We do the studies, the feasibility surveys, create the source documents, anything you need. You want to call us within any reasonable time period, we will answer or get back to you. We have a team of people trained to help you. We also have a site owner academy. If you're not ready for the actual hands-on help yet, but you want to learn what it takes to run a site, we have the Site Owner Academy. We, of course, have the CRA Academy. What else? Digital social media consulting, patient recruitment. What else, Chris? CRO services. We're doing a lot, right? And these monthly webinars, of course. We're not going to stop doing this. So, again, hopefully we were able to help out. We're going to be done. The replay will be emailed to everyone today, and then either later today or tomorrow, this replay will also go on YouTube, so you can let all your friends and colleagues and loved ones or enemies know about this.
Well, I don't think that says anything good about us if they think this is worthwhile sending to their enemies.
I'll take it. If someone has an enemy out there that hasn't heard about us, I'll take the referral. And I'll take the friends too.
Okay.
Any closing comments, Chris?
No, I think that was excellent. I think that's definitely beneficial for those who do not have experience with SOPs and need it.
And next month we'll do something probably more business related, like how to grow your clinic or something. I'll come up with something good. And then Amy will put together some slides. She keeps impressing me with these slides. I actually learned something from reviewing these slides. ITHS is my biggest takeaway. Take advantage of that site. Download all their forms. You never know when universities can take those things off. Right now they're open to the public, but if they start getting a lot of traffic, they might start wondering where it's all coming from.
I don't think it was the university, but the GCP training we used to use that was free. It's no longer available. Is that a university? No, that was
Mayo Clinic.
Yeah, Mayo Clinic. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So they could have just gotten a lot of traffic and been like, "Hey, why are all these people using our stuff? Let's just." Quintel's used to offer free GCP training too, and now people are charging for these things. And you can get, if you look or work hard enough, you can get almost anything for free. Now, if you don't have the expertise or the knowledge, you bring on an expert to help you. But if it's just a matter of needing to find a place to start, it's out there.
Sure.
Right? So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. We got a couple questions I'm going to get to you. NIDA has free GCP training. Yep. Thank you all. Appreciate it. And until next time, reach out to me anytime, and we will be in touch. Bye-bye.